Let's go. 10 hungry cooks, 1 life-changing prize.
This kitchen is chaos.
Yeah. This is a story of great love, but it's not the one you think it is.
What more could you ask for?
It's where the magic happens.
New this summer on BBC iPlayer.
The BBC News at 6, now on BBC One with Fiona Bruce.
Today at 6, Britain is boiling, Europe is burning, and scientists tell us we're going to have to get used to it. So far, Wales has experienced the hottest day on record by 2 degrees. Figures are still coming in, and forecasters are warning it's likely to be England and Scotland's turn tomorrow.
We don't know if we've broken the all-time UK record or not because the data's still coming in, but if we haven't, we've got very close.
And in Europe, an alarming commute. Areas in Spain, Portugal and Greece are being consumed by wildfire. At Luton Airport and Northen, flights have been suspended as parts of the runway have melted. Most schools in England and Wales have stayed open, but some have closed early or not opened at all. And for farmers, it's a challenge to keep the livestock cool.
And coming up on Sports Day, later in the hour on the BBC News Channel, we'll have the latest from the World Athletics Championships in Oregon, where Katarina Johnson-Thompson is attempting to retain her heptathlon title.
Good evening and welcome to BBC News at 6. It's been the hottest day on record in Wales by 2 degrees, with data still coming in, and forecasters expecting tomorrow is likely to break records in England and Scotland. And scientists are warning us climate change means we will see more of such extreme temperatures. Train services have been badly disrupted in England and Wales. Some tracks have buckled in the heat, and flights suspended at Luton Airport and Northen as the runways have melted. An unprecedented red weather warning for extreme heat, meaning there's a threat to life, is in place in much of England, including Manchester, London and Leeds. An amber warning covers the rest of England, all of Wales and southern Scotland. Temperatures have still been recorded in the 30s across all the UK nations, much higher than would normally be expected at this time of year. And Santon Downham in Suffolk saw the highest temperature at 38.1 degrees Celsius. Our correspondent Daniela Ralph has the latest.
Keeping cool any way possible. Normal, everyday life has had its challenges today. In central London, some still braved an open-top bus tour, while others cope with the intense city heat in a more traditional way.
We've had ice pops, we've had ice creams, we've had slushies, we've had smoothies, so a fair few drinks.
We've just taken on plenty of water, staying in the shade as much as we can, and just making sure having a wee dip, keeping the fluids up. So
we live in America, so this is pretty normal for us. So yeah, we are actually laughing about how big a deal it is here.
But it was a big deal if you were flying into or out of Luton Airport this afternoon. The high temperatures caused a defect on the runway and all flights were suspended. Engineers are currently trying to fix the problem. Once flights resume, passengers will be able to look down at the parched landscape that makes up much of southern and eastern England. Cambridgeshire looking especially dry and brittle as the county records some of the highest temperatures.
We are actually still seeing temperatures coming in over 38 degrees. We don't know if we've broken the all-time UK record or not because the data's still coming in, but if we haven't, we've got very close.
But for so many today, the usual routine has continued, with some alterations. This building site in Dagenham in Essex has changed its schedule. No more than 45 minutes outside before you swap with a team working inside.
Over in the Middle East, whether that be Dubai or anyone else, buildings are built. No one stops because of the sun. If anything, we'd rather work in these conditions than when it's raining.
And did you ever think of not working today?
And we gave the option for people not to work and not to come in this week and next week. And everybody said, no, of course not. The weather's not going to faze us. Building work still has to happen and it's not going to make a difference. So here we are.
Taking it easy and keeping cool, the orangutans at Twycross Zoo in Leicestershire probably have the right idea, as we all try to find our own way of managing in these excessive temperatures. Daniela Ralph, BBC News, Dagenham.
Well, ice lollies have been on the menu for school children and polar bears, as places as varied as schools, care homes and zoos cope with the sweltering weather. Our North of England correspondent Danny Savage is in the centre of Doncaster this evening, and it's looking pretty parched behind you, Danny.
Yeah, it is. It's everywhere. As the grass is brown, it's very dusty. Weeks of dry weather are now being followed by 2 days of intense heat. At lunchtime today, Fiona, the airport just outside the city here, Doncaster, and also RAF Cranwell in the south of Lincolnshire were already topping out at 32 degrees. That was before the heat of the day built. And people have been listening to the messages, though. We've been talking to various people around this area today. They've listened to the messages and they've adapted their routines, and we've been seeing what they're doing.
Right, Year 4, it is our first break time of the day. We are going to go outside and enjoy...
At this primary school in Doncaster, things were looking up for Year 4 this morning.
Much needed ice pops.
An early break outside, but with some restrictions. On the parched grass, they had to stay in the shade. No running around.
I understand it. If we're running around in the sun, then we might actually get poorly and we might get sunburnt and it might hurt us.
You can tell there's been a lack of rain. At lunchtime we're going to keep the children in all together because obviously it's midday, the sun's at its hottest, and we think it's safer for them just to stay inside at that point. But it's quite nice getting out for some outdoor learning as well this morning in the shade.
At Thornhill House Care Home near Barnsley, they were doing everything they could to keep the residents cool and safe. There were drinks everywhere, along with more ice lollies and salad on the menu rather than cooked meals.
The residents have said they want more salads and things like that over the next day or two. Is that a good thing, working in a kitchen, a bit less heat?
Well, yeah, because you've not got to have cooker on in these degrees. So, yeah, that's good that they want salad, yeah. Healthy as well.
But convincing the elderly to stay indoors isn't always easy.
Some of them can be quite stubborn, but in the end, they know we're doing it for what's best for them, and they do listen. They're good. Bless them.
By lunchtime, Doncaster was one of the hottest places in the north of England. The local wildlife park had closed to all visitors so they could concentrate on animal welfare, like chucking ice cubes to the polar bears.
The bears, they're sort of like primary concern in this heat. Want to make sure that everyone's as safe as possible, and the decision was for the safety of the workers here today, the public, and our animals. We want to make sure everyone's staying safe.
As the heat built, trains were ordered to go slow, 20 miles per hour in places in Yorkshire.
This is the East Coast main line at Doncaster, and this train is heading north to Inverness, already running about an hour late because of speed restrictions. And tomorrow, with the temperatures forecast to be even hotter, LNER are running no services on the East Coast main line, south of Leeds and York.
There's already been a record number of wildfires in England and Wales this summer. This one near Wakefield added to the total this afternoon. Danny Savage, BBC News, Doncaster.
A 16-year-old boy has become the fourth person to drown in open water after getting into difficulty in water in Berkshire. Thames Valley Police say the teenager was found in Bray Lake near Maidenhead. The emergency services have issued urgent appeals for people to stay out of waterways and reservoirs. It's not a good day to be travelling by train in England and Wales, with entire lines cancelled and many others running reduced or slower services. And as we've heard, the runway has melted at Brize Northen and has been affected by what's been called a heat defect at Luton Airport. We'll get the latest from there and John Ironmonger in a moment. But first, let's talk to our transport correspondent, Katie Austin, who's at King's Cross Station. And it's looking pretty quiet there, Katie.
Yes, plenty of delays and cancellations around today, including lots on the board behind me. Passengers have been told not to travel by train today unless absolutely necessary. There are reduced timetables in operation and there are speed restrictions in force to try and prevent the track buckling and damage being caused to overhead lines. That's basically because the railway isn't really designed for the heat we are now seeing. Now, across major stations, there are about 20% fewer passengers going through today than normal, but it seems not everyone has heeded the warning not to take the train unless necessary, with some services to the coast really full, and that means those people are now going to get stuck in delays and disruption that have built up as the day goes on as they try to get home. Now, tomorrow it's a similar story. speed restrictions in operation across the country, but the East Coast Main Line is going to be particularly affected, and that's because its infrastructure is particularly susceptible to the heat, and there will be no trains running from here at King's Cross up towards York and to Leeds.
And John, you're at Luton Airport for us this evening. There's been a change in the situation there just in the last couple of minutes. Some flights are now taking off.
Yes, some flights now taking off, but arrivals still suspended as we know it. It was extraordinary. It got so hot on the runway this afternoon, we understand, that basically the tarmac just broke apart, and that's caused all sorts of disruption to flights this evening. And at one of the busiest times of year for the airports too, as schools break up for the summer holidays. There have been people on Twitter saying that they're stuck in a plane on the tarmac in Alicante and Benidorm, waiting to get back to the UK, but they're delayed, of course. EasyJet says all flights to Belfast, Milan and Parma are unable to operate too. Now, Luton Airport has apologised for the inconvenience caused, and it provided a short statement earlier saying that following today's high temperatures, a defect was identified on the runway. The runway has now reopened, we understand, but it's more evidence, in case you needed it really, that the UK is not quite prepared for temperatures like these.
John Ironmonger and Katie Austin, thank you both. Health officials say the heat has put extra pressure on hospitals, but so far they are coping. Some older hospitals have taken the decision to cancel routine outpatient appointments and non-urgent surgeries because of the very high temperatures in operating theatres. Our health editor Hugh Pym has spent the day at one hospital in South London.
A memorable day for Cade and Cavorm, and not just because baby daughter Adea had arrived, born this morning in a heat wave. They'd brought in their own fans to try to keep cool.
I had my mum fanning me with a handheld fan. I had my husband holding the fan right up to my face because I was sweating as I was pushing. So it's a lot of adjustments we've had to make, but we've made it.
Housekeeping the
fantastic. And we're going to go in the ward now, aren't we, with it?
Here at St Helier Hospital, extra drinks for patients to keep them hydrated were being delivered. Dahlia was one who was relieved to have a regular supply brought to her bed.
There's always cold water for it, and they put ice cubes in there. When they change it and put ice cubes in, lollies, ice creams.
But dealing with the heat is very difficult. The buildings predate the start of the NHS in 1948. There's no air conditioning.
As we're standing here now, this actual prefab building, it's a bit like a greenhouse. So it's additional temperatures, despite all of the windows and us trying to do everything in our power to reduce the temperature. Staff needs to be continuously hydrated. Our patients have to be hydrated. So tiring very, very easily in these extreme temperatures.
It's the middle of the day and it's already 30 degrees here in A&E. The heat has added to the extreme pressure seen in units like this and increased the strain on staff.
Hi, so another busy day.
Doctors here are concerned that based on previous experience, a heat wave can store up problems which last more than a few days.
The impact of heat on long-term conditions lasts for many days, even when the temperature has dropped. So we're anticipating an increased number of admissions and attendances today, but we will continue to see the impact on our services of this heat wave for 10 to 14 days forward.
Just getting some for the 6th floor renal department.
Ice lollies were free for staff at the hospital, and some were also taking them up for patients.
They're complaining a lot that it's very hot and stuff. The windows aren't fully open, but ice lollies will treat them.
NHS England said almost all services had continued to run, but they know that tomorrow will bring more heat and further challenges and pressures. Hugh Pym, BBC News at St Helier Hospital, South London.
Well, we're being warned that climate change means these sorts of extreme temperatures will happen more regularly. Periods of intense heat do occur within natural weather patterns, but scientists say they're becoming more frequent, more intense and are lasting longer. Our climate editor Justin Roller is here. Justin.
Thanks, Fiona. So first off, as much of the country endures record temperatures, the obvious question is, why is it so hot? Well, that's simple. Southerly winds are bringing hot air up from Africa, which is helping drive the brutal heat waves Spain, Portugal and France have been enduring. Now, those same southerly winds have now brought that blistering heat here to the UK. And what makes it worse is a weather system called a heat dome. It sits like a lid on a pot, look at that, over Europe, held in place by a high pressure system. The sun heats it, but the air remains stuck within the dome, so it's pushed back down to the parched earth, raising temperatures higher and higher.
We're not ruling out further heat waves. Continental Europe is very hot at the moment, and the northern hemisphere is really hot. There's heat waves in the United States, there's heat waves in China, and it's certainly looking like this summer's going to be much warmer, and we're going to see a lot less precipitation than we usually see.
How does this compare with the past? 1976 is perhaps the UK's most famous heat wave. Temperatures hit almost 36 degrees, so lower than today, but the hot weather went on for days and days. And extreme heat is getting more common. Of the top 10 hottest days since the Victorian era, when records began, 7 are in the last 20 years. So what about the future? Well, first off, we don't yet know what this summer still has in store for us. The Met Office says it hasn't ruled out the possibility of more heat waves this year. But climate scientists say we can certainly expect more heat waves in the years to come. Here is how hot the Earth is now. Look at that. A little more than 1 degree over what it was before the industrial era began and we started burning all those fossil fuels. That pink blush shows the hottest areas. Now this is what the world would look like at 2 degrees of warming. Now look how much hotter much of it already is, particularly northern regions. At the moment, the world is on track to get a bit hotter than this if countries stick to the commitments they've made to cutting emissions. So what happens if they don't stick to their carbon cutting promises? Well, if the world does nothing at all, the worst case scenario, this is how things would look. Temperatures are 4 degrees above pre-industrial levels, and look how much more of the whole world is significantly hotter now. Well, all this hot weather has prompted Prince Charles to comment today. He says it shows why cutting carbon emissions is so vitally important. As I've tried to inculcate for quite some time, he says, the climate crisis really is a genuine emergency, and tackling it is utterly essential. Fiona.
Justin, thank you. Well, Europe is also experiencing the fierce heat wave with extreme temperatures and wildfires burning in countries across the continent. Blazes in Spain, Portugal and Greece have forced thousands of people to evacuate and scorched huge swathes of land. And an apocalypse of heat is how officials in France are describing the situation there, with large wildfires burning in the southwest, as our Europe correspondent Jessica Parker reports.
Into the forest and the front line of an exhausting battle. One that today we were able to witness.
Up in the woods you can see guys tackling the fires. There's a huge amount of activity down here and it is hot, it is smoky. Just look at the haze in the trees.
The smoke thickens the further in we go. The flames suddenly all too apparent.
The fire rekindles in many places. We have to be very careful with these conditions. We're in a pine forest. The vegetation is so dry here, and with the temperatures, the fire reaches the top of the trees very quickly. Flames reach up to 80 meters high.
Along here, we were due to reach an evacuated campsite by the coast, but we never got there. Things were getting worse. You could see it on the ground and in the sky. Water bombers, one after the other, flying over our heads. They never stop here. They can't. But soon we, along with others, are told it's time to leave. Back on the main road, the thousands of evacuations were plain to see. Smoke means for many, it's just not safe to stay. Here at this centre, you can at least take a moment to cool down.
It was very smoky this morning. It's very bad for the lungs. I knew there were problems coming, so I prepared a grab bag. Even the medications for my dogs were ready to go.
For some, it's a matter of frantic phone calls to find a place to sleep tonight. Who knows when they'll get to go home?
It can be in a few days, it can be in a few weeks. It's very difficult now to say, but we'll try to make people come back to their house as soon as possible.
France's wildfires seen from above are an alarming sight. Winds and over 40-degree heat made for a destructive mix today. Temperatures are set to drop tomorrow, and for these men, that can't come soon enough. Jessica Parker, BBC News in Gironde.
And let's just show you these dramatic pictures from northwest Spain. Alarming scenes for passengers on board a train in Zamora this morning. Their journey came to a halt with flames on either side of the tracks. Fortunately, the train managed to continue on its way. There's plenty more information on the heatwave on BBC News Online, including the latest travel advice, how hot it is where you are, and tips on staying cool. Head to bbc.co.uk/news, or you can use the BBC News app. The time is 6:20. Our top story this evening. Wales has reported its hottest day ever, 2 degrees warmer than the previous record, as temperatures continue to soar across the UK. And still to come, from buckets of ice to freezing your bed sheets, we'll have some tips on things we can all do to feel more comfortable during this heat wave.
Coming up on Sports Day in the next 15 minutes on the BBC News channel, the England Test captain Ben Stokes says that playing in all 3 formats of international cricket is unsustainable, so he's retiring from the one-day game.
The third televised debate between the Conservative leadership candidates tomorrow night has been cancelled after Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak said they wouldn't take part. One of the 5 remaining contenders will be eliminated this evening. Conservative MPs are voting now to decide who that will be. Then, over the next few days, the candidates will be whittled down to a final 2. And following that, Conservative Party members will vote to decide the winner. The result will be announced on September the 5th. Here's our political editor, Chris Mason.
What do you do as Prime Minister when you'll soon be ejected from Downing Street? Well, go up as a passenger in a warplane and take a video of yourself while it's refuelled mid-air.
After 3 happy years in the cockpit, and after performing some pretty difficult, if not astonishing, feats, I am now going to hand over the controls seamlessly to someone else. Don't know who.
Well, it could be the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, with the most support among MPs so far. The Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt has finished second in the first 2 rounds.
Good morning.
The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has finished third.
I'm going to be fighting hard for every single vote, and I'm not taking anything for granted, but I'm optimistic. Thank you.
The former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch is still in the running, as is this man, Tom Tugendhat, although he's widely expected to be knocked out later.
Tonight, the race for number 10. We're live with the...
All 5 were on ITV last night, duffing each other up in public.
Rishi, you have raised taxes to the highest level in 70 years.
Liz, in your past, you've been both a Liberal Democrat and a Remainer. I was just wondering which one you regretted most.
Another debate on Sky News tomorrow has been cancelled after these 2 got cold feet. This evening, the start of Boris Johnson's swan song in the Commons. We won't see much more of this. He's defeated but demob happy, and reminding Labour he thrashed them.
We sent the great blue Tory ferret so far up their left trouser leg they couldn't move.
Mr. Speaker, the delusion is never-ending. What a relief. What a relief for the country that they finally got round to sacking him.
Debates here in the autumn will look, sound and feel different, with a new Prime Minister centre stage. So the discussion about Boris Johnson's legacy carries on down there in the House of Commons, and along that corridor and up the stairs, Conservative MPs voting on who should replace him. And no doubt discussions to come over the summer around those questions of extreme weather and climate change. So the vote carrying on for another 30 minutes or so. We will get the result and crucially find out who has been eliminated at 8 o'clock this evening.
Chris at Westminster, thank you. Now let's take a look at some other stories making the news today. Nottinghamshire Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner has been banned from driving after she was caught speeding 5 times in 12 weeks. Caroline Henry was disqualified for 6 months and fined her £2,500. Ukraine's president has suspended his security chief and top prosecutor over accusations some members of their departments were collaborating with Russia. Volodymyr Zelensky says hundreds of cases of suspected treason and aiding and abetting Russia by Ukrainian security officials are now being investigated. Football's governing body is to trial a ban on heading the ball with a view to removing it from the game for children under 12 in England. The Football Association says it will apply for a law change from the 2023-24 season if the trial is successful. Let's go back to our main story now, and the heatwave in the UK, with Wales recording its hottest day ever. The temperature reached 37.1 Celsius in Flintshire. The heat is a particular challenge for farmers trying to keep their livestock cool. Howell Griffith reports.
If you're feeling hot and bothered, spare a thought for Cynic du Boeuf, a Highland cow far from home at the Royal Welsh Show. Chloe's hoping she can keep her cool for the competition.
They're coping all right at the minute, touch wood. I mean, hopefully it just stays like this. There's a nice breeze coming through now, but fingers crossed, it all goes well.
Good luck.
Thank you.
This is Britain's biggest agricultural show, the first in 3 years due to the pandemic. Roasting heat wasn't going to stop them.
We've never actually got to the point where we would have cancelled the show. If that point would have come, we would have taken it seriously, but we were confident that we've got sufficient mitigations in place, working with our natural resources on site, lots of trees, lots of buildings.
Morgan's trying to keep his animals as happy as well. Pigs in muck. They can't sweat, so would normally be wallowing in mud.
The animals are a little bit stressed, they are they're a little bit, you can tell by the way they're panting and the way they're constantly getting up, sitting back down, trying to roll and stuff. They are a little bit distressed by the heat.
It's just gone 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the hottest part of the day, and there's no escaping the warmth. But what you also notice is it feels quite quiet. Normally there'd be thousands more visitors, but it feels like some people have stayed away to avoid the heat. Staying in the shade seems to have been the solution. The new fans in the sheep sheds helped too.
It's just too hot. But it's not so bad. Like, they've put the new fans in and there is a breeze, but it's just not quite enough.
After a day of record temperatures in Wales, tomorrow should bring cooler, if not quite balmy weather. And for Chloe, at least the heat of the contest ended with a win. Howell Griffith, BBC News, Llanelwedd.
Well, that's the animals. What about the humans? What actually happens to our bodies in this hot weather? And what can we do to stay cool? Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, has some tips.
The UK simply isn't used to this, and nor are our bodies. Oh, it's warm in here, isn't it? This is the heat chamber at St Mary's University, Twickenham. That is warm. It's been used by sporting greats like Andy Murray and Max Verstappen. But even an amateur like me can show how heat affects our physiology.
As my core body temperature starts to creep up, blood vessels near the surface of the skin open up, pushing heat to the surface, trying always to keep that core body temperature on an even keel.
That can mean a drop in blood pressure as the heart works harder.
Now, another key way in which my body regulates its core temperature is through sweat.
That's why dehydration can quickly become a problem. Working out in this heat is not recommended, but staying fit all year round is.
Well, people who regularly exercise are regularly experiencing higher body temperatures internally because you produce a lot of heat when you exercise. So then that leads to better preparation for these heat waves.
The elderly and those with heart and lung conditions are most at risk from extreme heat, but even the young and fit can feel the effects.
Too long in the sun can lead to heat exhaustion. Symptoms include headache, dizziness, nausea, heavy sweating, and pale, clammy skin. Left untreated, it can progress to heat stroke, a medical emergency.
This whole area is in the sun the whole time.
St John Ambulance are a familiar sight at public events in all weathers, on hand to offer help and advice.
So what should you do if you come across someone with heat exhaustion?
We want to bring them out of direct sunlight, somewhere cool, where they can lie down, raise their legs, encouraging blood flow back to the brain. Hydrate them as much as possible with clear fluids, so water. And if they're not recovering in about 30 minutes, we'd recommend phoning 111.
And the health advice is simple. Stay in the shade, drink water, use sunscreen, and keep an eye on the vulnerable. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Well, shall we take a look at the weather? Ben Rich is here. Ben, we are going to be hanging on your every word, and it could get even hotter in some places tomorrow.
For some, tomorrow will be even hotter, Fiona, yes, and I'll show you tomorrow's temperatures in a moment, but today's have been striking enough. An extraordinarily hot day across vast swathes of the country. Wales setting an all-time temperature record provisionally. Cornwall setting a new record. Jersey also set a new record. Santon-Downham in Suffolk, the hottest place of all, 38.1 degrees. There are still some figures trickling in. We still have then this red warning from the Met Office for extreme heat because, as we've mentioned, for some tomorrow will be even hotter. And tonight isn't going to give you much of a chance to cool down. Lots of sunshine continuing for most through the evening, some areas of cloud. And then if you're heading off to bed at around 10 o'clock, we'll look at that 31 degrees in the centre of London, 23 in Glasgow, 22 in Belfast. It will be really uncomfortable for sleeping. And whereas we'd expect to see these orange colours draining away from the chart overnight, they don't really. Around dawn, temperatures briefly getting down to these lows. So we are starting Tuesday morning on a very warm note. In fact, this is the hottest wedge of air of this whole period of hot weather. It's going to be sitting in place for tomorrow. Coming in from the west, we've got frontal systems trying to introduce cooler, fresher air. Where that hot air stays in place across eastern parts, if it stays sunny for long enough, we could see some unprecedented high temperatures. So, out towards the west, some showers creeping in. Could be the odd thunderstorm. Belfast, Plymouth, a little bit cooler than today. But further east, this is where we are expecting the core of the heat. We'll zoom in. Parts of the East Midlands, Eastern England, Lincolnshire could see a temperature tomorrow all the way up to 42 degrees Celsius. That certainly would break the all-time UK record. But things are changing through tomorrow night. We will see these showers and storms, quite scattered in nature. They'll be creeping eastwards. Most of us will be a little bit cooler by Wednesday morning. And this is the rest of the week into the weekend. Temperatures closer to where they should be. Some rain at times. But before we get there, another very hot day on the way for some. Fiona.
Ben, thank you. Well, that is the BBC News at 6 on Monday, the 18th of July. You can keep up with all the latest developments on the BBC website. From the 6 team, it's goodbye. The news continues here on BBC One, as now it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Bye-bye.